you know, we have been on the other side of that, and really, you know, there's a lot of motivation there. There's no question about it. And, you know, they're playing for, as I said earlier, the ability to clinch the division and play in the SEC championship game. But when you play in rivalry games like this that have been going on this long, and there's so much, you know, just involved with the game, regardless of, you know, where each team is at, you know, and where they're at in their season, you know, it just makes it for a great game. You know, our guys are going to be excited just because it's Georgia, and, you know, a lot of our players are from the state of Georgia, and certainly close by if they're not from the state. And, you know, Georgia recruiting a lot of the same guys, and, you know, these guys playing high school football together, either or playing together or playing against each other. So I just think that, again, not just the history of the game, but proximity and geographically, how close we are, and with our guys, you know, again, just enjoying the chance to play in a rivalry game like this, you know, 6 o'clock ESPN game. And so I think all those things together, you know, we're going to be very excited to play Saturday. And I think that you start with trying to always find out where he's at, because, you know, he's going to move around some, and they do a really good job with that. But he's definitely a tackle for loss hazard, whether it be sacks or in the run game. They don't have any problems with pressuring him from wherever. So you always got to know where he is. And then on top of that, he's just a very physical player that has made plays against pretty much everybody they've played. So you got to know where he is, and you got to have a way to account for him in both the run game and the pass game, because he's got great penetration from wherever he's coming from.
Because pressure that they bring overall, is that a good challenge for guys like Brandon Foles, Jay Prosh to help out in the blocking game?
Absolutely. There's no question, and especially that combined with the fact that, you know, when you're in a 3-4 defense that really creates just protection, you know, it's you know, it's a tough, you know, it's just a tough scheme protection-wise. And that's why a lot of people bounce in and out of it, even if they're not a 3-4 defense. They'll bounce in and out of it just because, you know, the protection issues that it gives you. So, you know, all of that becomes a factor.
When Jones was in high school, did you see him as this is the guy that's going to be an All-American kind of
Well,
player?
you know, he was coming out right when I had gotten here, so, you know, I knew somewhat about him, but I think at the time he was committed to USC, or if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And I thought he was a very good player, and I thought he was a big, good-looking physical specimen. You know, I didn't know enough about him at the time, you know, of exactly, you know, how good he would be as a football player. But I watched enough film on him to know that he certainly had a chance to be. And, you know, him coming back and transferring and being this productive, I'm sure that the people that were around him for 3 years aren't surprised. You know, but I didn't know that, you know, that much about him when we got here. A solid guy. I mean, a guy that comes out to practice, and, you know, he's always around the team. A very positive, you know, upbeat guy. He was obviously one of the first guys that, you know, that we recruited when we got here, and just gotten real close with his family, and I just believe and trust in him and his family, and, you know, what they stand for off the field, as well as, you know, everybody's pretty well documented what he's done on the field. So, you know, he's just a young man that I got a high level of respect for in a lot of ways.
He said that his best memory of the 2010 season was Cody Burns catching a touchdown pass in the national championship game. Not his catching the Iron Bowl, not anything that he did. Does that surprise you? That he said
It doesn't. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, again, I think he's a very selfless guy, and I think that, you know, that's what's going to make him be successful, whatever he does after this, because it's never really about him. It's never really been about him. He's, you know, he could stand up and beat his chest for a lot of things that he's accomplished that, you know, people would dream about accomplishing, you know, in his career here. But he never does that. You know, he's always going to talk about somebody else, and he's always going to be one of those guys that steps up to the plate and tries to help somebody else. And again, that's why I talk about what he, you know, represents off the field, you know, as well as on.
We think about Lutz and those accomplishments that he's had here. The Alabama touchdown, the first thing that comes to mind, or?
It's one of the first ones that come to mind. I mean, there's no doubt, but you know, he's had so many great catches out there. I mean, he's had so many one-handed snags, and he's really, you know, he really came on as a blocker, you know, as his career, you know, unfolded, because you got to remember, when he came out of high school, he was primarily a glorified wideout. So, you know, he had to learn the blocking game, and he had to learn how to do all those things, and it was very important to him to be able to try to improve in that regard, and he did. And, you know, so he'll always be remembered for certain catches that he made, and some spectacular ones at that, and some that the timing was impeccable, as you just mentioned, you know, in the Iron Bowl 2 years ago. But his blocking and just, you know, everything he's brought to the table, other than the things that you even visibly see him do as a player. What he's like in the locker room, what he's like in encouraging young guys, what he's like, you know, bringing guys in that, you know, want to play, and he wants to help them, and he wants to help them learn the offense, or, you know, just learn what college football is all about. He's just always been one of those guys that, you know, and that's why I think most of our guys, you know, on our team have a very high level regard, very similar to me, you know, on Phillip. And it's because he's just a different guy.
He said you played a big role in convincing him to get the surgery, that his health beyond football. What was that conversation like when you came to that?
Well, you know, he was very distraught. And, you know, my number one goal always is for doing what's in the best interest, you know, of our student athletes, particularly when it comes to injury. And I try to treat everything like I would say that if it were my own son. And he was at a place right now where when it all went down, nobody was really sure exactly what direction this was headed, and obviously we would eventually get there medically. And I just, you know, told him, I said, I know there's a lot on your plate right now, because you're thinking about wanting to finish this season out and making sure that you do all you can to help Auburn win, because that's who he is. And then on the other side of that, you've got him thinking about a career beyond this. And I just said, at the end of the day, when you really sit down and think about this, and you know, you really soul search and pray on it and do whatever you have to do, you got to end up doing health-wise what is the best for you, not 10 weeks from now, but 30 years from now. Because one of the things that happens with an injury like that is you don't want to walk around with a limp for the rest of your life either, so that you can finish, you know, what you started. And I think there's hard decisions to be made sometimes in there. Well, when all the evidence came back, it wasn't hard. He had to get it done. But in the interim, you know, we had to have that conversation. You know, CJ doesn't look like he's going to end up being able to play this weekend. Chris Davis still on the bubble. Jeff Whitaker, I think, has got a chance. You know, he practiced Sunday night. Obviously, we got to take some baby steps with him to see where he's at. You know, so a couple of those other guys, like Chris, will be a little bit later in the week, you know, as we move forward. But very unlikely CJ will play.
Is D to that point where he could start and see?
Well, you know, we played him between 30 and 40 plays the other day, which was good to see. I feel like he held up well. We're getting to the point where we're looking at getting him back to that. But again, I think it just depends on how, you know, this week unfolds, certainly tonight at practice.